Never mind. Start over. Not good.
Oh,
It's not
man.
good, friend. Welcome to Book Talk Etc., a podcast bound to grow your TBR. I'm Tina from TBR Etc.
And I'm Hannah from Handpicked Books.
And this is a conversational podcast about books and more from two Midwest mood readers who are easily distracted by new releases. And today, we are sharing our best books of the year so far.
If you enjoy listening, we'd love for you to follow us on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. And if you have a quick minute, please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or sharing us on social media. It truly helps us connect with other book lovers.
Hey everyone, it is the start of a new month, so we wanted to take the time to invite you to join us on Patreon. Patreon is an online membership platform that gives you a way to financially support our podcast. And for $5 a month, you get access to all of our bonus content. It's bonus content, but it's also such a wonderful, supportive community of readers. And I feel like if you've ever wanted your reading to be more of a social experience, this is a great way to find that connection. For $5 a month, you get access to 2 bonus episodes and 1 recorded event, and invites to our BTE Discord server and Facebook group. You will also have access to everything we have created since we've started, which is a ton. And we host a monthly community read in our Discord, which is like a text-based book club that feels like a big group chat without the pressure of being on Zoom. And we have a very exciting month planned. Hannah and I have been hard at work. Our bonus episode will be our What's in the Mailbag, and our second bonus episode will be a topic we've never done before, so you'll have to wait and see. Our bookstore browse will be with the owner of Call and Response Books, a Black female-owned bookstore based in the south side of Chicago. And our community read is All This and More by Peng Shepherd. For more details, we invite you to head to patreon.com/booktalk etc. or look for the link in our show notes. Thank you for your support.
Hey, Tina.
Hi, Hannah. How are you?
I am good. I am really excited for this episode.
Oh, I know. I was prepared, I think Monday, and it's Thursday when we're recording. So now I'm like, did I actually fully put everything in here that I needed to? We will have to wait and see. But I was so excited. I was like prepping in advance just for fun.
We have a lot to go over today, and I'm excited to see what stats you're bringing from your reading year so far and your favorite books. So it'll be fun. I don't know what you're bringing today, so
I forget too. So let's get let's get into it.
Classic.
I will be just as surprised as you will be. No, I know I have loose ideas, and I know some listeners, of course, you've heard me talk about all of these before. I'm excited, Hannah, because some of these I doubt we've heard you talk about so far. Maybe, but I don't think all of them.
You'll have to see.
Okay, sounds good. All right, my loving lately. Now, this is something I had to look back and just search in our old episodes because I thought surely I've brought this before. Hannah, do you watch reality TV at all?
Rarely.
Rarely. That's not like not your big thing.
I am interested in it. I like to listen to even podcasts on like how reality TV is structured and like the manipulation of reality TV.
Yes.
I find the psychology behind it really interesting, but I don't have a ton of shows that I watch. So
got you. Okay. Well, this one could be a nice into the reality TV world, and it's Top Chef. Okay, this has been out for 21 seasons. So guys, this is not a hot tip, but season 21 just finished, and you can watch all of the episodes on Peacock. This one is set in Wisconsin, and the finale was on a cruise, which they've never done before. And it was a very interesting, I liked it because I was like, wow, they're on a cruise. Y'all know my fascination with cruises, even though I never want to step foot on one. But then I thought, is this whole big ass boat just for these final 3 contestants and the production? I was very curious. I would love a behind the scenes of the finale because I'm like, what's going on here? Top Chef has been on since 2006. So of course, again, y'all have heard of this before. To me, this is the perfect show though. If you're not familiar, the show features chefs competing against each other in culinary challenges. So usually there's a quick fire, which is one that's sort of a shorter challenge, and then they have a bigger one that rounds out the end of the episode. And the contestants are judged by a panel of professional chefs and other notable people from the food and wine industry. And as you continue to watch more, I'm like, oh, it's Gail Simmons. Like, I don't know these people. I am not a foodie at all. And yet I recognize some of these chefs just because I've been watching this show. They go to beautiful places. And I feel like I learned so much about cuisine in general, both what we eat here in the US and what other cultures eat and what other communities have. It's all very interesting to me. And the reason I'm bringing it right now is because this season is the perfect season to jump in if you're looking for a new show, because there's a new host. The host is Kristen Kish, and it's her first season after taking over for Padma Lakshmi. I loved Padma, but I thought Kristen did really, really well. She is a former winner herself, so she gets it, and she's so genuine. She cried a couple times for the finale 'cause she was just so emotional, like thinking what this means for the final three and the winner. And I love this show. I was in it because there was a little bit of controversy with the finale and the production of it and sort of the manipulation, if you will. So I was happy to read all of those articles after I found out who won. I'm actually genuinely sad that it's over because it's one of the only shows that I watch live week after week. So it's the summer. If you're looking for something that's interesting, entertaining, not too heavy, I think this is great. And I mean, if you really want to, you've got 21 seasons to go through. It's Top Chef.
Did you watch that in real time, like as it was coming out?
I did this season.
That's so
all
fun.
seasons since I've been watching it, which is, God, 10 years probably at this point. Yeah. And I don't really watch shows each week. I do. There's a few. I mean, I could probably put together a list. Summer House is one, which also is finished. Top Chef and The Real Housewives of certain cities, but that's about it.
No, that's really fun. I am a foodie. Well, I say I'm a foodie. I mean, I wish, but I'm interested in food.
Yes, exactly.
But
I'm interested. I wish I was a foodie and could cook like that.
Correct.
And, understood the salt, fat, acid, heat of it all. And I sort of have an idea, but then the things they're saying, the way they describe it, I'm like, what in God's green earth is that? But then it gets me in a fun Google rabbit hole. I feel like I'm learning. It's a good time.
Yeah, for sure. Also, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat is another great show and miniseries on Netflix if you want to continue the foodie journey.
Good recommendation. I have the book. I forgot that it was also adapted, or it's a series.
And it's just 4 episodes.
Oh.
The Salt,
is it
Fat, Acid,
Heat.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Crushed it. So my loving lately is a blog. It's Molly Reed's blog. It's just mollyreeds.com. And she puts together really fun reading lists on her blog, including ones for kids, which I love because my kids love their bookshelves and having a big collection. She has a post with 25 winter books for your kids and 10 great book club books. So I love blogs that have great reading lists like this that you can get ideas from. I think especially, well, I don't know about you all, but I definitely can get decision fatigue. And sometimes it's so nice having those curated lists to be able to help decide on what you want to read next. But she also has a really cool book club kit that comes with a full calendar of book club picks with monthly themes. They have curated add-ons for each theme, such as recipes, playlists, and other fun free ideas that go along with that month's book. There's also a facilitator worksheet, and the coolest thing on this list is a book rating rubric. It's a weighted calculator that takes into consideration things like prose, character development, how highly you would recommend the book to others, etc. And it does all that math for you, and it's a really, really useful tool. This is a really cool resource that if you're considering hosting a book club but just don't know how to start, this would be a great thing to purchase. And it's only $24 on her blog. And I just think that is so worth it, even if it's something that you're just considering. It's just a really cool tool. So that is Molly Reed's blog, but primarily her book club kit.
What a clever resource. I was just looking at it as you were sharing it. I follow her, but I've not heard about this book club. You can download a free sample too if you're curious, like what specifically am I going to get? I love this idea, and I feel like my book club would really like it because we meet pretty regularly, but we don't have like a specific structure. And I like how she has book club questions and icebreaker themes, and oh yeah, this is really cool.
Isn't that an awesome resource?
Very cool. Yeah. And I love that star rating rubric. We just do thumbs up, thumbs down.
Right.
Thumb in the middle. Which
right,
also
exactly.
it gets the job done. You know what I mean? So
it sure does.
I like that. All right, good. Thanks for bringing that. We can link to that in our show notes. And speaking of book clubs, our latest read is a joint latest read. It is our June community read for our Book Talk Etc. patrons. And it is The Ballad of Jacquot de la Haye by Brianne Cameron. I cannot call this book by its proper name to save my life. I keep calling it The Battle of Jacquot de la Haye, but it's The Ballad of Jacquot de la Haye. And I personally am so glad we picked this. I don't think I would have prioritized it had it not been for book club. I'm really glad we did. Can we do like my book club does, Hannah, real time? 1, 2, 3, thumbs up, thumbs in the middle, or thumbs down? Because I don't know what you thought about it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3.
I can't see your thumb.
Well, my thumb is you can't see it? My thumb is a
I
thumb
would say
up.
mine's like this.
Hannah's showing me a 3/4 of the way thumb up.
Yeah,
so not a full thumbs up.
Yeah.
But like a more than halfway thumbs up. Okay.
But if you had to ask, like if it was just like a did you like it or did you not? Or I guess more importantly, would you recommend it or would you not? I would absolutely recommend it. Yes.
Cool. Sounds good. All right. Let me tell you about it. It is a dazzling epic tale based on true events that illuminates a woman of color's rise to power as one of the few reported female pirate captains to sail the Caribbean, and a forbidden love story that will shape the course of history. It is set in Yakimo, or it starts in Yakimo, Santo Domingo, and Jacquot de la Haye is an unknown but up-and-coming shipwright, which is a shipbuilder. I didn't know that coming in. Her dreams are bold, but her ambitions are bound by the confines of her life, with her self-seeking French father. When her way of life and the delicate balance of power in the town are threatened, she is forced to flee her home and become a woman on the run, along with a motley crew of refugees, including a mysterious young woman named Teresa. Jacquot and her band become indentured servants to the infamous Black Hand, a ruthless pirate captain who rules his ship with an iron fist. As they struggle to survive his brutality, Jacquot finds herself unable to resist Teresa despite their differences. When Black Hand hatches a dangerous scheme to steal a Portuguese shipment of jewels, she must rely on her wits, resourcefulness, and friends to survive. But she discovers there's a grander, darker scheme of treachery at play and ultimately must decide what price she is willing to pay to secure a better future for them all. Okay. Well, I will let you sort of kick it off with what you thought.
Yeah, I will say that what I loved the most about this book was the Motley Crue aspect. I love books with found family, and I thought that that was the strongest thing about this book. And I think that if I were to pick something that I felt like really made the book worthwhile for me as a reader, that is definitely high up there on the list. I will say I tend to struggle with books that have a lot of action. And although the first half of the book really was mostly setup, which I would say I actually enjoyed the most, but the latter half of the book was really intense, which I think a lot of people are really going to love because it was a really fun, adventurous story with a lot of, brutality, and they become pirates, and it's this motley crew, and they get into some silly business. But I don't know why, but as soon as someone starts describing like an action scene, I kind of zone out, and I listened to this on audio, which I don't actually recommend because I feel like as soon as those action scenes would start, I would automatically stop listening, but then I wouldn't tune back in. And I think that really impacted my reading experience. So I almost don't trust my opinion fully. But overall, I would say that I liked it. I'm excited to hear what you think.
Okay, no, that's completely fair. And you are right. I think one of the, for me, I actually quite like the action scenes and the setup. The first, I would say, third of the book was probably my favorite. I was like, what is happening? I literally wrote, this book is so fucking exciting. It never lets up.
Yes.
Because literally and I thought it would be harder to get into it. I had no trouble at all getting into this book because you find out right away what's going on, and she moves it along at a pretty good pace. You figure out what's happening here. And I think the synopsis does a pretty good job giving you enough. It tells you sort of what's to expect, and it holds pretty true. One thing that I think the synopsis does that does this book a disservice, in the short part of the synopsis, it says there's a forbidden love story that will shape the course of history. If you're going into this wanting that forbidden love story, you're not going to be satisfied because, yes, there is a love story there, I loved the queer characters. I loved a lot about the motley crew and the friendships and the found family. The love story, though, was there, but it was not the main thing. So I think
Yes.
I thought it was going to be a lot more about that. And this is a pirate story first. There is a sapphic romance, but it's really secondary to the pirate story. And I personally was fine with that because I was just very interested in all of what was going on. And I kept thinking, oh my gosh, this is based on a real person. If you Google Jacquot
Mm-hmm.
de la Haye, they come up. She comes up. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's really fun. So, of course, they say, though, I did my little research. Not a ton is known about her. So I wonder what liberties were taken. I'm sure quite a bit was, but I thought this was still a very cinematic story.
Yeah. I was going to say cinematic is just a really great way to describe this book. I
Mhm.
definitely could picture this being a movie.
Oh, easily. I think this could easily be a movie. I thought that Jacquot was and you can see I'm struggling to pronounce her name despite having listened to it. I'm like, Jacquot, and I know I'm doing it wrong both ways. But I love that she was such a complex character. Complex,
Mhm.
because the whole time when I was reading, I'm like giving the eyes, like, okay, because you go from this, you go on a journey with her. And I understand why the author took it the way she did. This is a pirate book. It's violent, right? It is
Yeah.
violent. Jacquot was not always likable, but at the end of the day, she is a pirate. So it made sense, right? I really enjoyed it. I probably landed about 4.25 if we're going to give it a star rating. So I think it's very much worth the read. It's not getting very much hype at all. So I think if you're looking for something that's action packed, if you like the idea of a pirate story, hell, if you're going on a cruise, I think this could be a very interesting pairing. And I'm excited to chat with the patrons later today. This book was The Ballad of Jacquot de la Haye by Briony Cameron.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm really glad that we read that too.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to our 2024 reading so far.
Mhm.
Starting with some Storygraph stats, I've read 44 books total so far this year, which is pretty normal for me. I had originally started the year thinking I was going to be reading less, but then surprise,
Sorry.
I joined the podcast, so
Yeah.
didn't happen. But I'm actually really thankful for that. And I would say that overall, since I've joined the podcast, my reading life has improved in terms of my star ratings and
Yay.
stuff. But my top 3 moods have been emotional, dark, and reflective. Again, I have no surprises there for
Mhm.
me.
Yeah.
And then my top genres were thriller, which is very surprising. That's never a top genre for me. Literary and romance.
Ah, okay. Okay. I'm excited to hear this about you because I don't know that I would have predicted almost any of that.
Yeah.
But let me share quickly first where I'm at. Right now, I've read 60 books this year, and I was writing my script. I had made a copy of my script from 2023. I was at 60 books last year, exactly the same number, which sort of creeps me out. I am a very person that likes equilibrium. I don't know, and John always says that about me. I'm a person that likes to be in equilibrium, and so it doesn't surprise me that I've read the same exact number of books halfway through the year as I did last year. My Storygraph stats changed subtly from last year. My top 3 were emotional, reflective, and dark. Is that the same as you?
Yes, but just in a different order.
Yeah, and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that's kind of great though, because then if you're listening to the show, to types of books you can expect from us. Last year was very similar. It was dark, emotional, and mysterious. So very close. My
Mhm.
top genres are thriller, literary, and contemporary. I'm surprised romance was so high for you. I don't know that I knew you read as many romance as Storygraph is telling me you have.
Yeah, well, I read a lot of romance books earlier in the year,
Mm,
and I have a few up on my TBR coming up. So
okay.
you'll hear about a couple of them here soon as well. I would say that I go through seasons in reading where I'll read a lot of horror and thriller, which I've brought a lot of those to the show
Yeah.
recently. And so now we're about to, switch it up a little bit, and you'll probably hear more of those romance and literary books coming up because I just kind of tend to do that where
Yeah.
I go back and forth and I'll get like really obsessed with one genre and then I'll switch. So
Interesting. Yeah, I love that. I feel like I'm more consistent with okay, thriller and then literary. You know what I mean? I
mhm.
switch more quickly versus like taking longer periods of time where I'm reading one.
Yeah.
My formats, I was a little bit surprised on. So we kept track of ebook, audio, and physical. I 81% audio for me. And
Mm-hmm.
I often listen or read in multiple formats. So I counted the format that was most dominant. So 81% were audiobooks, 12% digital, 7% print. My poor print reading does, I think it was like maybe 2 books, but hey, it's something I enjoy, but I also am embracing this season of my life. If I'm going to read,
Yes.
it's probably going to be on audio, and that's okay,
Yep.
right?
I'm in the same exact boat. My audiobook consumption is at 59.1%. My digital is at 11.4, which again, I would say that my digital reading being higher is also indicative of my season of reading right now, because next to audiobook, digital on my phone or on my Kindle is easiest, especially if I'm with a kid at night
Yeah.
or etc. It's just easier to read in the dark. And print is at 18%. And that
There you
was
go.
because at the beginning of the year, I was trying really hard.
Yeah.
And then, once it got to be springtime, I was like, I just want to read.
Yeah.
So
Let
I'm
me
gonna
just
I'm
do
gonna
it.
pick this up.
I feel you. I understand.
So
I didn't know you were such an audiobook reader. So, I knew a little bit about what you read and, sort of your reading habits from online. I didn't know you read so many audio. That makes me happy because I feel like,
mhm.
I don't know, I just like talking audiobooks, and it's sort of not a different reading experience, but sometimes the audio format lends itself to a more enriched reading experience, or sometimes different, like you indicated with Jacquat, like that maybe wasn't the best format for you. And it's like,
Right.
it's cool to have those conversations and get really, really nerdy about format. So
Agreed.
I'm glad we looked at that. Fiction, nonfiction, very consistent. Mine was 93% fiction and 7% nonfiction. I don't
Yep.
have any real plans to change that. I always, again, think, hey, I'd love to read more nonfiction. I want to have a nonfiction going at all times, but I am who I am,
Mhm. Yeah, I have similar stats there as well. I have read 88% fiction and 9% nonfiction. I do try to read at least a memoir once a month,
Yeah.
but there have been 2 months out of this year where I have read 100% fiction. And I'm okay with that. I think that I'm clearly making an effort, which I said that I wanted to do because I love memoir.
Yeah.
Almost every single memoir I do decide to read that I pick up because I think I'll like it, I end up giving 5 stars. So I
Yeah.
really should pick more of them up. They're just not what I would consider comfort reading or
Yeah.
entertainment reading reading is definitely supposed to be more than that, but as it sits right now, it's not always the first thing that I think about picking up.
I hear you for sure. And I'm the same way. The majority of my nonfiction was memoir.
Mhm.
And I do really like memoir. So again, need to kind of consider that and maybe throw another nonfiction or two in the mix.
Exactly.
Something you had mentioned that you were tracking personally this year, which I think is so cool, is the nation/countries that you've read from. And
Mhm.
I'd never tracked that before. So what inspired you to keep track of that, and where did you land so far?
I have been following a lot of people on TikTok, YouTube, etc., that read a lot of translated fiction.
Mhm.
And that's kind of where it started, where I was like, I wonder, because I felt like a lot of the translated fiction that I read was from the same countries,
Yeah.
Japan, Korea, France, and Sweden. And those were like the only four that I had. And then I was like, oh, there's so much like Spanish translated literature out there too. Or I would love to read more books from other Asian countries outside of Japan, China, South Korea. Like I would love to read more Vietnamese literature and things like that. So that's really where it stemmed from. And then I just started tracking it in my reading. And that's just I was like, it would be fun to just track not only translated literature, but all of the countries that I've been able to visit, armchair travel. I'm not much of
Mhm.
a traveler. So I was like, this will just be fun to track in general. So I've got Australia, Canada, Denmark, France, India, Jamaica, South Korea, the UK, and the United States, with the US, India, and France being my top three.
Oh, that's fun. Okay. And so,
Yeah.
and I think you're so right. If you're not looking, it's one of those things. This is why I like tracking anything, is if you're not looking, it can be easy to neglect that area, especially if it's something you care about or want to improve. I've
Mm-hmm.
read from 8 different countries. That's not great. That's not a great number. I want to up that by the end of the year, but it's US, Australia, Ireland, England, Japan, South Korea, Canada, and the Caribbean. Even though I'm counting the Caribbean, I sort of was like, of course, as per usual, overthinking it because I'm like, well, the author's American, but the majority of the book is set in the Caribbean and like, what specific countries? I'm like, girl, relax. Like I sort of took it from the, all right, where is the book set standpoint and use that as your marker. I did not count it if they were on vacation because I read a couple, and you haven't heard about it yet on the show, but there was one, the Guncle, the second Guncle. They were on vacation the whole book. So I'm like, I'm not counting that as a book that it was from, they were just on vacation, but a very interesting stat to keep track of if you're at all interested. Another thing that I'd not kept track of before is if it was a book that was sent to me, whether it was an ARC or a finished copy or an advanced listener copy, if it was a book I got from the library, or if it was a book I bought myself. And I'm shocked by my results. Truly, I thought I was going to have like 80% library books. I was like convinced that that was my primary mode of reading. It's almost equal. 21 library books, 18 books I owned, and 22 books that were sent to me, either ARCs or advanced listener. What I did though, I do a lot of buying on Pango after I read, and I counted those as books I own. So I am a person who doesn't buy a book very often if I've not read it yet. I'm somebody that will read it or be like halfway in. I'm like, yep, this is a keeper, and I'll buy it on Pango if it's there. And then that way I have it as my little shelf trophy.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah,
I annotate
exactly.
it later, whatever. So that is where I landed with that statistic. And I'm glad you mentioned it because I am shocked.
Yeah. And I realized that I forgot to count my Libby reading after I had already done this. So,
We'll allow it.
the stats might not be like 100% accurate, but they're probably pretty close. So I read primarily from my own TBR at like almost 40%. And then around like 35% were review copies or books sent to me, which I also am super happy with. Those are my main goals with my reading. I really want to read from my own shelf, but I also want to be better about actually talking about the books from publishers and authors who have sent me things to review and talk about. And so I'm really happy with those statistics. I do want to bring my library reading up. It's only sitting right now at about like 5 to 10, somewhere between 5 and 10%. And I really want to use Libby more. I talked about that a little bit in our last episode, how I get too stuck on, I don't know why I just don't reach for audiobooks via Libby. I love the app, and in the past, in previous years, I almost listened exclusively on Libby. So I would like to do that more for the rest of the year.
Yeah. I love my library app. That's my first thing. That is where I keep track. Like that is sort of my TBR where I'm like, oh, that book sounds good. Let me see. Let me put holds on it. And then it'll come in and I'm like, what's this book? Why did I add it if I don't remember to write it down? But that sometimes is fun.
I did recently, you'll love this, Tina, cancel my membership at Everend. So I will definitely be utilizing my library more because I'm not going to have that ready access to those books. Although, did I have the access to begin with? Who's to say?
Unclear.
It's unclear.
If there are no haters of Everand, that means I am dead because I am their biggest hater. Like I can't. You've heard me talk about this ad nauseum. If you're like, what are you talking about? Send me a note because I will happily share my grievances about that particular company. I'm glad you said that. The last stat that I tracked from sort of a percentage standpoint were my diversity stats. And I am at 34% books written by BIPOC authors and 10% queer. And that is something I would definitely love to increase as we get into, looking toward the second half of 2024. Sort of with everything. I'm good about it at the beginning of the year because it's top of mind. And then I get lost in the summer and the busy season and I'm just reading who God only knows what. So now that I'm taking time to be intentional, we will see how that changes.
Yeah, I have pretty similar statistics there. I have 36.4% BIPOC authored books. And then I've read 22% from LGBTQ plus authors. One thing that I'm also trying to track is I noticed that 95% of my books were from non-disabled authors, and I've only read about 5% from disabled authors. However, I will say our recent book club pick, The Ballad of Jacquot de la Haye, the author is both queer and disabled. So I loved the intersectionality too with that pick.
Right.
If you are also someone who is looking to read more from disabled authors, another recommendation is that book.
And you're right with that book. She also did a great job having representation from all areas,
Yes.
including her brother. And it did not go unnoticed for me.
Yeah, which makes sense too with the intersectionality of her own identity. That's something that is really important, but is something that we just need in literature more. And I thought that it was definitely done really well in that book. So,
all right, that's almost wrapping up our stats. So before we get into superlatives, I have a few almost made it's that I wanted to share. And these are books that I really, really enjoyed. And who knows, by the end of this year, they might flip flop and make it into my top 10. We'll have to see. One that really pained me, this was the one I took off at the last second, is Homegoing by Ya Jesse. I still am like, that book is incredible. It's a masterpiece. It was very, very, very good. 5 stars. The Gunners by Rebecca Kaufman. I just personally loved that one. Dixon Descending, Karen Uten. Leaving Roxana Robinson. I think I just loved the reading experience of that one. And then finally, Wolf at the Table by Adam Rapp. That is a thriller. No, I shouldn't call it a thriller. It's suspense. That does not get enough press. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I have a couple. So as I mentioned before, I read a lot of romance at the beginning of the year. And one romance that I still loved and gave 5 stars was Funny Story by Emily Henry. I read a couple of other romances, though, after that I loved even more. So the Emily Henry didn't make it to my list, which almost pained me. I also really loved Mavefly by C.J. Lead, and that is probably definitely one of my top horror books if I'm just talking genre that I've read this year. I just loved it, and the longer that I sit after having read it, I actually love it even more, which I always love when that happens with a book.
Me too.
Yeah, so those are 2 that I loved and I almost put on my list, but they didn't quite make it. Oh, I do have one more.
Yeah.
I did read How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith this year, which I loved, but I have read other journalistic nonfiction like that I have loved even more. I don't know. It's hard to talk about books like that because I'm not a journalist. I mean, I don't,
right.
you know, like that's not my wheelhouse. So I don't want to say like, I've read books that I felt like did it better.
Yeah.
I don't know.
His was interesting because it was very personal. He was going on like his own trips and asking his own questions. So it was very personal and informative. I too read that this year and I loved that book.
Yeah. Loved it. Didn't quite make it to this list. And also nonfiction just hits different for me personally as a reader. Yes. So, you know, we can keep that in mind as well. But I do highly, highly recommend and rated each of those 3 books very highly.
Okay. Well, good. All right. Let's do some superlative chat. And all right, quickly, we'll go through them. Biggest surprise. I realized that I was having a little trouble selecting a book for this one. I think I'm going to go with We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kluwer. I just feel like that is one of those books where the less you know about it going in, the better. I knew it was horror. I think I was surprised by how friggin' scary I found it. I talked about this last week and shared my personal connection with being spooked, but thought that book was just very solid and just classic horror.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to just bump that and read that soon because not only you, but also my good friend Alyssa from Worlds Within Pages. She's a great follow on Instagram, but she was texting me last night and was like, you have to read this book because we always talk about how books don't scare us. Like we're like, no, we can read anything. Books don't scare us. And she has always said that to me. And she was like, no, like I can't read this book at night.
Yes. Yeah, I can see why. It's real good.
Yeah. Well, my biggest surprise, I'm going to bring this book back, was Funny Story by Emily Henry, because I actually have a really complicated relationship with her books. I have not loved everything that she has put out there. I liked Beach Read pretty well. I liked Happy Place pretty well. I actively disliked Book Lovers. Don't come for me, please.
I'm coming.
I did not like it at all. And so I don't know. Like I was like, you know what? I'm going to give. Oh, but I loved People We Meet on Vacation. That's my favorite of hers. And which I also feel like is not that popular of an opinion, but I digress. I didn't know how I was going to feel, but I wanted to give Emily Henry one more shot. Like this was my, I'm going to give her one more chance book. And I loved it. I think it's her best work yet. I gave it like 5+ stars. Like I said, it almost made it to my top of the year. I just absolutely loved it. I was so surprised.
I'm so glad to hear that because I have not read that one. I've read some of her books. I think I've read 2 of them and really liked both, but that's another author. I'm like, I could go back someday and just read all through her catalog.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about this next one, but I'm
Oh.
gonna quickly.
Oh, okay.
My biggest,
Okay.
well, I mean, I'm joking. You'll see why.
Oh.
My, you're like, okay, we'll skip it. No, I feel bad. Quickly, my biggest disappointment was The Nature of Disappearing by Kimmy Cunningham Grant. It's not a bad book. It's just a book that I think I was expecting more out of, and I'm sad that it was not for me. So
Yeah, and you were looking forward to it
I
so much.
was, I was. So that's okay.
Such a bummer. I also have a thriller on my biggest disappointment, which is Never Saw Me Coming by Vera Kurian. This was one that was just on my TBR for so long, and I was so excited. The premise
Yeah.
sounded so good. I love a campus novel, and I don't know, the synopsis just sounded so unique, and I did not like it. I really didn't like it. So I was so disappointed.
Yeah. Yeah. I hate when that happens. So
Hmm.
yeah, my least favorite book of the year is Everyone is Watching by Heather Gudenkoff. You have not heard me talk about this because I didn't even bring it to the show. 'Cause if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all, sort of is my philosophy. And
Sure.
I bought this book. I literally I never purchase books, ebooks at all, because I just use my library or whatever. But I was excited about this when it was a reality show tie-in where contestants were competing for like $1 million prize or something like that. And I just don't think it was that good. Now, I know a lot of people really enjoy Heather Gutenkoff as an author in this space, so I'd try her
Mm-hmm.
again. I just think this is missable.
That's fair. Okay, so another superlative we thought would be fun is best audiobook. And I was also surprised that mine was The Women by Kristen Hanna
Oh,
because
mhm.
Julia Whalen doesn't actually usually work for me. And I think
Wait.
it's because I listen to Julia Whalen's romance novels and she has such a deep voice. And not that, like, I don't know, people in romance novels can't have deep voices, but like, I don't know, like the ones that I've enjoyed from Julia Whalen are like The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. And then this one, which is The Women by Kristen Hanna, which is more of like a sprawling historical fiction. And I think I just prefer her voice paired with those kinds of stories. So,
I am aghast. This makes sense though. I get that. I understand what you're saying about that. I'm just gonna have to sit on it and think about what you just shared.
I've dropped a lot of bombs in this
I
episode.
know. I
I
guess
do
so.
apologize.
I love this though. This is why I like to podcast. I love learning more about my co-host. My best audiobook is Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. This is a fun thriller. This is one thriller on audio that I can recommend to anybody if you like mystery thriller. It's got this snarky main character and it's about something bad that happened. She comes back to her hometown at the behest of her grandmother. And what's great about this is there's a podcast tie-in. So a podcaster comes to town and is sort of unearthing this cold case. And the main character is snarky, a little unlikable, but also very readable. And I thought it was just a very fun book to listen to.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be listening to this one. I
Mhm.
keep meaning to bump it on my list, but you know how it goes.
Yes.
And it's definitely one that I want to try to listen to specifically this year. So, another one that we wanted to talk about is the most original story that we have read this year. And mine is It Had to Go to I Who Have Never Known Men, because that
Ah,
was just such a creative post apocalyptic dystopian book. But also, I'm a fan by Sheena Patel because that one was just so strangely stream of
uh-huh.
consciousness and random, but also good, and I enjoyed it. So that
Mhm.
one gets a silver medal there.
Yeah. You know what? I'm a fan. It's so funny. I was trying to create something for our, I think, Instagram. And I was like, Hannah, I don't know what this book's about.
Yeah.
What on earth? I was trying to read the synopsis. I go,
Yeah.
I can't read this. I don't understand. But that makes sense that it's the stream of consciousness. And you did that one
Yes.
on audio, right? And it worked
Yes,
in
I
that
did.
format?
Yeah, and the author narrates it. And I don't
Mm,
always love when an author narrates a fiction
me
book,
either.
but I will say that this one, I gave it a thumbs up. It was a good narration.
I love that. Okay. My most original was Annie Bot by Sierra Greer. There was no question. I'd never read anything like this before. It's about a sentient robot who learns and the relationship that she is in. And I will leave it there. I'm making a face, but I don't want to say too much. This one was one of those books where I did this on audio. I remember exactly where I was when I started listening. I was like kind of being fussy because nothing was hitting. I turned it on my audio and I'm like, oh yes, this is a good one. This one is sticking with me, and I thought it was just so original and very much worth the read.
Yeah, and it's a short one too, which I feel like sometimes when
Yeah.
you're in that rut, you just need
Mhm.
a quick, snappy,
You
original
need a
book.
win. You need a
You
quick
need a
win.
win.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that one worked for you.
Mm.
tell me what book it is that you think more people should read.
I thought long and hard about this one. You reminded me, and this is not what I have written, but How the Word Is Passed, Clint Smith, like 100%. That's one I think people should read. Like, I don't often should people, but that's one, yes, we should be reading this one. I think there is another book that people should read that's on my top 5 I'm going to hold in my pocket, but the one I have written down is Jaded by Ella Lee. And I picked this because it's a debut. I don't think not enough people are talking about it personally. And this book is about a lawyer who is in this high pressure law firm, goes to a party, and she gets assaulted, basically. And it's about this person who is this perfectionist, this daughter of immigrants who has this very specific view of herself and is struggling to square what happened in real life with who she thinks she should be and how she thinks she should act. This is thoughtful. It explores, like I said, sexual assault, identity, culture, and more. It's it's heavy, but it's got a lot to say. And I just loved it. So that would be my book I'd like more people to read.
Yeah, mine is actually How the Word Is Passed as well. That was what I had plans to bring for a book. No, that's okay. We co-signed it. I think that is even more indicative of the fact that more people should read that one. I would also say if you enjoy nonfiction like this, also give Jeanette Wilkerson a shot.
Yes.
Have not read her books this year, but I just can't let a moment or opportunity pass where I don't recommend her books. Yeah. The Warmth of Other Suns and Cast both are just so incredible and would make a good book flight with How the Word Is Passed as well.
You are reminding me. When we moved, packed my nonfiction. They were in a separate part of the house. So they're in a different area. They're in a box still. Mm-hmm. Don't judge. But my nonfiction is not visible with all of my other books. And I know I own at least one of those, if not both. So I need to go back and uproot them. And earlier when you had mentioned there were books that you thought, not did it better, but you thought you would recommend more. Were those the books you were thinking of?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. But I do like how personal How the Word Is Passed is, which is why I think it makes such a good pairing with those other two that are a little bit more in-depth historical. But the way Jeanette Wilkerson writes them, it's like narrative nonfiction. Yeah. I mean, you feel like you are listening to a story and it's really, really powerful. So yeah, I think paired with How the Word Is Passed, that would just be a really good experience to have.
I was just going to say a great experience.
Yeah. And then I do have one more for a book I think more people should read.
Oh, good.
And that is The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. So this is a classic, and it is one that I just very randomly picked up earlier this year. I decided sometime in January I wanted to read more classics this year. I've read one. But this really did remind me that classics can be fun and they also can be current. Like there were so many things happening politically in this book that are things that we talk about now in our current political and economical climate. And it felt very, very current reading this book. And I just thought that was really fun.
Yeah.
It was also just really funny. Like Edith Wharton, eat the rich, man. I mean, she was no funny business, like with her opinions. But it was just really funny. And I highly recommend it and think more people should try classics, especially that one.
Love that. I've not read a classic since I've started the show, but I think I've read maybe one and it's escaping me, whatever it is. But yeah, to your point, I think I like when books that are classics still have cultural relevance today. It's sort of interesting to see like, oh, everything is a cycle. Everything's cyclical, right? It all comes back around. So
yes, it does.
Good. I love that call out. We'll wrap things up with what we want to do with our reading for the rest of 2024. And I have to say, I've been enjoying my reading year. I don't know that I'd change very much. I think for me, I've had a lot of high highs and some low lows. And I have a lot more 2-star books this year than ever before. And that's not a bad thing. It's just, who wants to read a 2-star book, right? So I feel, though, personally, the most satisfied with my reading life when I'm reading widely. So I want to continue to focus on that. I'm talking different countries. I'm talking different authors, experiences. I like intersectionality. You had mentioned that earlier. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's not something I've had an eye on. As much as I enjoy my thrillers, I can get burnt out on those. So I want to mix it up, continue to do that. And I also want to read backlist. This year, I've read more backlist than ever before. And for the first time since doing the show, I have more backlist in my top 5 halfway than I do books published this year. So I thought it was really interesting. So I want to
Mm-hmm.
keep that up. I also want to read a book set in Latin America, Southeast Asia, and Africa. Those are my countries or areas, I should say, that I'm like, hello. What about you?
I really like how specific that was with the countries and places that you want to read from.
I
I
know.
would like to
Yes.
take a look at my list too and kind of make a couple of intentional
Mhm.
places I'd
Now,
like to read
God
from.
help me. I need to write this down so I don't forget because that's my thing. I say great things on the show about what I intend to do, and then it goes into the ether. You all hear it, and I forget. So I'm going to write it down somewhere.
Write that down, and then I'll annoy you about it.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, so I had mentioned earlier my biggest gap in my reading life is disability representation, and I would really like to read more books from disabled authors with those experiences later on in the year and just moving forward. It's just something I want to keep an eye on more as it pertains to reading widely. And then I would also really like to read some fantasy. I haven't really read a lot of fantasy this
Oh,
year, and it's
yeah.
something that I have always enjoyed but haven't kept up with since becoming a public reader. So I'd like to read more fantasy. I would also like to, I say, stop listening to so many audiobooks and read more in print. I don't think that that's really going to happen anytime soon to like on a large scale, but I would like to try to make more of an intentional effort to at least read like 1 or 2 books just in print, like without the audiobook helping me
Yes.
read along,
Uh-huh.
just in print on my, and I will count my Kindle as well, like on my Kindle or with a book in my hands. I want to be more intentional about making time and space for that.
No,
So,
I hear that. That makes perfect sense, and I agree. There is something to be said for taking the time to sit there and actually read. It's more of a time thing, I think, sometimes, or prioritizing thing.
mhm.
I had fun creating this book talk list. I encourage all of the listeners. I just went through my story graph. I didn't do anything fancy. I just looked at the books and like literally I had a little tally. I'm like, okay, ebook, audio, or no, that story graph will tally. But I did that for countries. I did that for, if it was an arc or what have you. So I encourage listeners to do the same. Check in on your reading, tag us, let us know where you're at, what you might change. If we inspired you in any way, we want to know.
Yeah, love that call out. I would love to hear as well.
Oh, yes. Never gets old.
Shall we get into our best books of 2024 so far?
Yes, let's do it. And I should say, these are my personal faves. This is not we're not, no, but you all know this. We're not reading critics, but these are our personal favorite books of
Favorites
2024 so far
in ranked order.
in ranked order, which
So
I
we're
made
saving
Hannah
the best
do.
for last.
That's right.
Yes.
Okay, you go first.
Okay. So my number 5 is The Frozen River by Ariel Lawhon. And this is a historical mystery set in 1700s New England from the perspective of a local midwife. In 1789 Maine, midwife Martha Ballard investigates an icy murder of a man potentially linked to a previous assault. There are a lot of secrets and a trial looming, and Martha's diary ends up being a big part of the story. It holds a record of the town's hidden truths as well as testimonials from the victims who are also her patients. This becomes the center of a really big scandal that ends up threatening her livelihood, her family, and the entire community. Martha truly risks everything to uncover the truth and fight for justice. I thought she was such a powerful female lead character. The only reason it's this high up on my top 5 list is because the ending was a little over the top and corny in a way that I didn't feel like matched the rest of the story's tone. Tina knows exactly what I'm talking about. Oh man. Yeah, it's just a little silly, but I will say that was a small scene and part of the overall reading experience, which I felt like overall I just really enjoyed the rest of the book. So I'm not going to fault it too badly for that. In the author's note, you find out that although fictional embellishments were made to this story, Martha Ballard was a real person, and the villain of the story was a real person as well. Martha is actually, and don't quote me on this, but she's like the great great grandmother or something like that of Clara Barton, who started the Red Cross. So I thought that that was really cool that the history of medicine ran really strong in this line of women. And that was a fun tie-in. I say that tentatively because I'm worried that I got those facts exactly right but I'm pretty sure, I know for sure that there's definitely like a medicine
Mhm.
tie-in to the story. I love historical fiction novels that are set in a unique timeline following unique characters, and I really love emotional stories about women fighting for justice. So this one hit a lot of my reader buttons, and that was The Frozen River by Ariel Lawhon.
I love what you said about that. It hit a lot of your reader buttons. It's also a really
Yes.
fun way to describe something.
Ding, ding,
I
ding.
ding, ding, ding. Yep. I also quite enjoyed that. That was a really good reading experience just across the board.
Yes.
All right, good pick. So I have Hannah to thank for my number 5. It is These Impossible Things by Salma El Wardani. And this is a debut novel about 3 best friends, Malik, Keys, and Jenna, who navigate the complexities of love, sex, and faith while balancing the expectations of being good Muslim women. And as they grow older, the delicate act of balancing all of these things really comes to a head with their desire to be a quote, good Muslim woman, their familial duties, their religious duties, and things become increasingly difficult. And we follow them as they find their own ways of adapting. I like this book from the first sentence. Very first sentence, I still remember what it was. It made me laugh. And I don't think I was expecting as much. This is a great balance of levity and depth. There's a lot of both in this. And just like you have that with your real friendships, right? You have really good times, you have really funny times, you have really, tough times and times where you struggle. These characters I rooted for across the board. I don't think there was one character I rooted for more than another. Although, of course, I was like, don't, what are you doing? Do this differently. But she explores their different choices in a very interesting way. There is a very interesting conflict, and you get to see the fallout from that conflict. And personally, I think if you're looking for a friendship story that follows women throughout several years of their lives, this is a fantastic choice. It also has some situations that will have you asking, what would you do? Which are some of my favorite types of books. This is great for book club, but be warned, it does have some dark spots. So check Storygraph. But I loved this book. It's These Impossible Things by Salma El Ordani.
Yes. Another cosign here. Such a
Yay.
good book. And I love that you described it as such a good balance of levity and depth. That is the perfect way to describe
Yes.
that book. So well
It's
done.
got a lot of both.
Yes, it does. So my 4th pick is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This is a romance novel where a cursed couple hatch a summer dating plan to break their cursed love lives only to find real love with each other instead. This is, well, first of all, for the millennials out there, this book opens with a Reddit thread. And that alone, I was like, yes, I'm going to love this book. And it's one of the most creative fake dating stories I have ever read. I almost want to say fake dating in air quotes. This book is a great example to me of how tropes exist for authors to reinvent them and find ways to make that trope their own.
Mm.
This was so unique and unlike most romances I have ever read. I will also add the caveat that this is not a super light summer romance. When I mentioned my top moods of the year, emotional, reflective, and dark, some of those were with my romance books too. So I like a romance rather than a rom-com, and I would definitely say that this book falls into that category. It's definitely a romance, but it also incorporated some really heavy topics, not in a way that I felt like made the book feel like it was trying to be or do too much. I equally loved the romance and loved the healing journey that both of the characters go through along the way. I love that this romance celebrates the individuals as well as the couple. And I also will say, you do not have to read the other books in this companion series before reading this one, but I had just read Part of Your World by this author before reading this book, and there is a subtle character overlap that almost acted like a Easter egg, and that was really fun to be able to figure that out having read another book in this series. So again, this definitely acts as a standalone, but I do think that you'll find some fun elements to this book if you have read the other books in the series as well. So that is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez.
Wow, you said so much in there that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think rom-com and stories with a romantic element often get conflated. Even I do it because I don't know that I have a good way of describing romance books in a way that doesn't immediately make people think rom-com. Do you know what
Yeah,
I'm saying?
for sure. I
Especially if you're
do.
not a romance reader, like a non-funny romance, like a
Yeah,
regular
and
romance. I don't know.
and this is probably too much to put in for right now. We might, I don't know if we could do an episode on this for sure, but like, because I have strong feelings about a romance in the romance genre, but because like a romance is just, there's like the build up, there's the get together, there's the third act breakup, and then there's the happily ever after. The romance really being that in order to be put into that genre, there has to be that happily ever after at the end. And if it doesn't have that, then you can't put it in the romance category. It's a love story, but it's not a romance. But I do think that there's an important distinction there between rom-com and romance, because in a romance, I feel like you can fit in so much. I think of like Tia Williams or, some of these other authors that have really hard stories, but definitely still within the romance category. And then you've got like Carrie Winfrey, who, writes these super like non-spicy, very easy rom-com that could be a Nora Ephron movie.
Oh, I would love to deep dive on that more because I know nothing. I also, when I read that for our, Renee and I did an episode about like books with romantic elements. And I was like, anyway, we could go on an entire tangent. I don't like the happily ever after has to be a part of romance. Because then what about the books that have a romantic element? And I see what you're saying. Like that's a part of the definition. Like literally, that's a part of the definition.
Which is where I get fussy. But I mean, like there are some books that I would call them like a literary love story. Like One Day by David Nichols.
Literary love stories. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would love to do a deep dive sometime about sort of the differences because I know you have a lot of opinions and you read a lot more in that space. So I'd like to learn a little bit from you.
I would love that too. What is your number 4?
It is What Happened to Nina by Dervla McTiernan. And I love this book. I did. It's about Nina and Simon, and they seemed like the perfect couple until a weekend trip to his family's cabin in Vermont ends with Nina missing and only Simon returning home. Simon's story about what happened to Nina and her disappearance does not make sense, and it leads to this sort of real tension between the parents, between Nina's parents and between Simon's parents. Obviously, they are both desperate for answers, and the case goes viral and you get a little bit of that media frenzy, and both families find themselves at this really high stakes struggle. And I'm going to leave it at that because I don't want to spoil too much. If you think this sounds too close to some real life things that have happened, there are elements to it, but I think she does a very thoughtful take on it. It didn't feel too derivative for me. And I swear, I did not know what to think of this book when I got a copy of it. I did not like her last book, The Murder Rule. And so I was unsure about how I would find Nina. I thought this was thoughtful. It truly had me gasping until the last page. And that, I don't say that's a hyperbole, but I mean it sincerely. Again, this is a book that will have you asking, what would you do in the situation? And this is my favorite thriller of the year so far. And that is What Happened to Nina by Dervla McTiernan.
Very nice. I have not heard a single bad review about this thriller.
So God, I want to scream.
Yeah.
And I'll still get folks who DM me and say,
Yeah.
like, I'm reading this live, da 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 da. And I'm like, I know, keep going. So
that's when you know it's a good book. Good pick.
She's a winner.
Okay, my third pick is Last House by Jessica Shattuck. This is a historical fiction family saga that explores complex themes of family, idealism, and consequences of progress. If you're a regular listener of the show, you'll know I just recently talked about this one. This book absolutely floored me. It's a slow burn for sure, but it gives the characters so much space to develop, which I love in my reading. We're talking multiple generations of family, all tangled up in this sprawling story that weaves history right into the family narrative. I don't think that this book is going to be for everyone. I think that some people might find it a little too character driven. So I will say, if you prefer more plot heavy historical fiction like Kate Quinn, this might not be the pick for you. But I think that if you really enjoy literary family stories that are very character driven, it's beautifully written. The way Shattuck switches perspectives from parents to the daughter from the parents to the daughter was brilliant. It really highlighted the clash of ideals between the generations, especially when it comes to politics. And speaking of politics, this book does deep dive and explore everything from the Cold War to social movements to oil. It had me highlighting passages left and right. There was just so much that was very thought-provoking about this book that I loved. So yeah, I would say if you enjoy slower books like that, then you should definitely give this one a shot. And that is Last House by Jessica Shattuck.
This sounds like a me book for sure.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a book that would be friends with my book, my number 3 pick. It's A
Mm.
Place for Us by Fatima Farheen Mirza.
I haven't read this one yet, but I really want to.
Oh man. Okay. It took me a couple years to get to it. I had DNF'd it once, not for any reason. I just like started 2 pages. I was like, I can't focus on this now because it is very character driven. But Place for Us follows an Indian American Muslim family gathering in California for their sister Hadia's wedding. And she has a love match that is breaking from tradition. What caught my eye about this is that this event marks the return of their estranged son, Amar, after 3 years, which forces their parents to face the choices and things that happened that led to his separation from the family. This book spans decades, and the narrative explores the family's crucial moments through each member's perspective. And it's one of those books that sort of flows in and out of who's talking. You're not, that's what I think I struggled with at first is you have to pay attention because you'll be in the past and then the next section you'll be in present day and it sort of flows. She does it so brilliantly. This examines identity, faith, American culture, and how small decisions can lead to profound betrayals. I loved it. It has a lot of depth. And I think if you are interested in family stories and don't mind stories that really they call for you to focus, I'm still thinking about aspects of it. It also hits very differently if you're a parent, because I think I thought the story was going to be about the siblings, and it is, but it's also very much about the mom and dad. And I very much appreciated that. And it also scares me because, every day we're making choices that affect our kids. And this book explores the outcome of some of the choices people make. Absolutely loved it. It is A Place for Us by Fatima Farheen Mirza.
Yes, that is one that has also been on my TBR for a few years now. So I'm excited to eventually give that one a go. You just said it. Sounds like a me book. I think that this might be an area where our Venn diagrams overlap in our reading tastes.
Yes.
Is these kind of more sprawling family stories. So yeah, I'm excited to eventually give that one a shot. My second to last pick is my favorite romance of the year so far, and that is This Summer Will Be Different by Carly Fortune. I was hesitant about this one. I think I mentioned before because I really didn't like her sophomore novel, but I loved her debut Every Summer After. So this one was kind of a toss-up. I didn't know how I was going to feel about it. Pleasantly surprised, and I'm happy to say this is my favorite of her 3 romance novels that she has released so far. This is about Lucy, who falls for Felix, a Prince Edward Island local with whom she shares undeniable chemistry with from the moment they meet. She finds out, though, that Felix is her best friend's younger brother, which creates a little bit of a complicated love story. I loved truly everything about this book. I thought the pacing was really smart. I liked that even though the couple got together in the beginning of the novel, that tension was still able to be built throughout the rest of the love story because of that forbidden moment when Lucy finds out that Felix is her best friend's brother. This book has such a strong sense of place as well. You are going to want to visit Prince Edward Island when you are done reading this. Like, it's going to be the next place on your vacation bucket list. I think this would be a perfect beach read if you need something to pack in your beach bag this summer. If you love a lot of pining in your romance novels, I also highly recommend this one. And that was This Summer Will Be Different by Carly Fortune.
Why don't I allow myself to read books like this? It sounds like a great time. I don't read these books. Like, people will contact me. They'll say, do you have any, uplifting books? And I'm like, no, I read nothing but dark, traumatic books, emotional books. Speaking of, my number 2, I really debated. I very much debated flip-flop between 2 and 1, but I settled. Number 2 is James by Percival Everett. And this is an action-packed reimagining of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, but it's told from the perspective of the enslaved Jim. Now, I should say, this book, I'm making it sound like it's super heavy. Part of what is so fascinating about this book is that Percival Everett made it, I don't even want to say what he did, but he does the thing that really, really brings you into the world of the enslaved characters. He brought these characters to life. And if you're familiar with Huck Finn, you'll know sort of the bare bones of it. James or Jim is about to be sold. And he overhears this and he leaves. And together with Huck Finn, who fakes his death to escape his abusive father, they go down on a raft on the Mississippi River. And they run into all these different things. And elements of what is in the original Adventures of Huckleberry Finn are in James, but they're done in such a different way because it's from James's point of view. And it retains a lot of the original moments, but it showcases Jim as a character. It talks about his intelligence and there is just a lot that Percival Everett does to this. And I don't know how he did it because, and I hate to say it, it sounds like it's really heavy, but there were a ton of areas that were really funny. And again, I think that's just the mark of a very clever writer, a very skilled writer to be able to bring us this with such a fresh perspective. I think audio is a way to go to this. It brought James alive, and I highly recommend it, obviously. It's James by Percival Everett.
Yes, good one. I haven't read that one yet, but my mom recently read it and she also gave it a big thumbs up. So,
yeah,
good pick.
It's a good one.
Okay, my number one is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. And this is, of no surprise to anyone, a post-apocalyptic novel, which is just like my bread and butter. And this is a heartbreaking dystopian and post-apocalyptic story of female friendship and intimacy set in a really unique but deserted setting and climate. This book adds such value to the post-apocalyptic genre. It is deeply feminist, but not in a way that feels trendy. More so in a way that feels philosophical and thoughtful and not binary or black and white. This book holds so much sadness that allows you to sit with grief in a way that actually feels healing. It was a really powerfully written book that I know I will continue to think about for a really long time. Its pacing was so unique. I recommend going into this book not knowing a ton about it like I did so that you can truly be surprised by the journey that the author takes you on. There were some plot elements that I was able to be really surprised by having not read the official synopsis, and I'm so glad that I did. This book is really hard to talk about in a way that feels thorough, but doesn't give too much away. But I just want to encourage anyone who reads literary fiction, post-apocalyptic novels, or even short novellas that really pack a punch to read this. Please give this a shot. You can read it in one sitting, but also at the same time, because of the content, you might not, but it's such a short book and it's so good. Please read it. Speaking of the superlatives for a book we think everyone should read, I'm going to say this one too. And that was I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman.
Fine, I'll buy it. I mean, fires up the old phone. Let me get this one.
And don't read the synopsis.
Okay, all right. I won't.
I'm being book bossy.
You're being book bossy, and I kind of like it. Okay, my favorite book of 2024 so far is probably not going to be a surprise because I just talked about it. It is The Light Pirate by Lily Brooks Dalton. This book is set in the near future. It's post-apocalyptic, and it's about Wanda, who is a unique child born during a catastrophic hurricane. And it's about her as she navigates a rapidly changing world. Florida and most of the world has faced relentless destruction from severe weather and rising sea levels. And she's born amidst the chaos. And it is a story about how Wanda specifically, but obviously how all of us adapt to the deteriorating environment and the remnants of society. It's structured in 4 parts: power, water, light, and time. And the novel reflects on the slow and fast dissolution of the world and highlights the resilience needed to face an unpredictable future. This is an unforgettable story for me. I initially listened to it and I had started annotating it, but then I would switch to audio and I'd go back to print. And recently, just this week, I sat down with my paperback copy and I was like, let me finish annotating this. And I found myself just sitting there reading. I was reading it again, and I don't reread. And I found so many more things that I think I heard but glossed over. There was something I wanted to highlight on just about every page. And what I love about how she wrote this is there are elements that are so exciting And then she'll drop something and then she'll move on quickly. And you're like, wait, skirt, what?
Yes.
What happened now? I just love this. I literally am buzzing. I can't say enough about it. So I highly recommend it. Even if you're afraid of climate fiction, I think it is so worth the read. It's The Light Pirate by Lily Brooks Dalton.
Yeah, I agree. This is a really accessible one. And it's just so beautiful and might change your mind about how you feel about the climate fiction genre. I would also encourage people to give it a shot. I thought it was a beautiful story.
Another cosign?
Another cosign.
We had
Tina.
a few. We had a few
I
this
know.
episode. I love this. All right. Do you want to do shelf editions?
Yeah, let's do shelf editions. I got to pull my thing out here without unplugging. There it goes. Okay. So my shelf edition is one that I'm very excited about. I just got this in the mail. I had pre-ordered it from Blackwell's. It is Blue Sisters by Coco Melors. And I read, I believe it was her debut, Cleopatra and Frankenstein, last year. Loved it. I loved that book. I don't reread often either. And I reread that one the same year that I read it because I had listened to it on audio. And then I was like, I want to annotate this.
Yes.
So then I read it in print. And so I've been really anticipating this book since it was announced. This is about the Blue Sisters who have always been exceptional and also exceptionally different. We have Avery, who is a straight-laced lawyer living in London and is your very typical eldest daughter, but she is hiding a secret. Then you have Bonnie, who was a boxer, but following a devastating defeat has been doing some other odd jobs throughout LA until a reckless night threatens to drive her out of the city. And then we have Lucky, who is a model in Paris, and Nikki, the beloved fourth sister, whose unexpected death left Avery, Bonnie, and Lucky reeling. So I have a feeling that this book is going to kind of be driven around this death of this sibling. And it says a year later, the three of them reunite in New York to stop the sale of their childhood home. I also love stories where people come back to their hometown or their home in general as they navigate grief, addiction, and heartbreak and learn to fall in love with life and each other again. This sounds like it's going to be just a beautiful story. I know that I love this author's writing, so I'm very excited to read this one, hopefully very soon. And that is Blue Sisters by Coco Melors.
Oh, yes. Now, you ordered it from Blackwell's. Is it not out in the U.S. then?
No, it comes out in the U.S. on September 3rd.
Nice. Okay. You'll give us an early peek then.
Yes.
My shelf edition is a book that also came in the mail, but I didn't order it. It is Whale Fall by Elizabeth O'Connor. Thank you to the publishers for sending. This is a debut from an award-winning writer about loss, isolation, folklore, and joy, and dissonance of finding oneself by exploring life outside one's community. You know, I'm still obsessed with the ocean. It was a theme last summer. It continues to be a theme this summer. Set in 1938, and a dead whale washes up on the shores of a remote Welsh island. For Maynard, who has spent her whole life on the island, it feels like both a portent of doom and a symbol of what may lie beyond the island's shores. A young woman living with her father and sister, to whom she has reluctantly but devotedly become a mother following the death of their own mother years prior, Maynard can't shake her welling desire to explore life beyond the beautiful, yet blisteringly harsh islands that her family has called home for generations. Then, two English ethnographers hope to study the island, and they come, and that feels like a boon to her. She gets a glimpse of life outside of her community and a means for escape. The longer the men stay, the more she feels pulled toward them, reckoning with the sensual awakening inside herself, despite her misgivings that her community is being misconstrued. And this is supposed to have simmering prose and sharp wit, and it tells the story of what happens when one person's ambitions threaten the fabric of a community. I feel like this could be very quiet. It's also set in a place that I've not read much about, somewhere in Wales. It sounds interesting to me, so I will give this one a shot. It's also quite short, which, you know, I don't hate. This is Whale Fall by Elizabeth O'Connor.
Yeah, that one sounds really good. And another country to add to the list.
Check off the old list. That's right.
Check off the old list. Good deal.
All right.
Well,
hope you enjoyed us. That's it for today. My goodness, it's been a long episode, but this was so fun.
So fun.
Thank you for spending a part of your day with us. Links to all the books mentioned can be found in the show notes. And if you enjoyed today's episode, you can help us by following wherever you listen and by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps get our show out to new listeners and grows our audience. And don't forget, if you would like access to exclusive bonus content, you can join us for $5 a month on patreon.com/booktalk, etc.
If you'd like to connect with us, you can email us at booktalk.etc@gmail.com. You can also connect with us both at Booktalk Etc. on Instagram and Tina at TBR Etc. and Hannah at Handpicked Books. Talk to you next week. And in the meantime, remember,
everything's better with books. Eat the rich, Hannah.
Eat the rich.